So today we're going to talk about what states allow RON, what states allow RIN, which is like remote ink notarization, what documents can't be done in some states, whether or not you can use a credible witness on RON or RIN, and then some other miscellaneous unique things that I found as I was reading through these state laws. So first, RON, remote online notarization, has all of these elements, and these are required. They have to do credential analysis, which is validating the signer's ID. They have to have another type of ID proofing, and each state's different on what it requires as that secondary proofing. The standard is knowledge-based authentication questions, or KBA. They have to have a live audio-visual session. It has to be recorded. The documents have to be encrypted, and you have to use electronic signatures to sign the documents. Now, currently, there are 36 states with RON laws in place. Keeping in mind that some states call remote notarization RON, and it's not, it's really RIN. So it can be confusing for states that are in that situation. For instance, Alabama. So in 2022, these 3 states are becoming active: Illinois, New York, and New Hampshire. Well, like I said, New Hampshire just went live 2 days ago. But Illinois went live January 1st. However, they have not enacted the laws or the training. So they are not approving any platforms, and they're not approving any RON notaries yet because they haven't put the policy in place yet to do so. Remote ink notarization is very similar to RON. The only difference is the very last item on this checklist. They use wet signatures. So you're in the audio-visual session, and the signer is going to sign the document with an ink pen, and then they're going to send the document to the notary, and then the notary signs with an ink pen. And that is the difference between RON and RIN in the short end of the stick. I don't want to stay on it too long. These states allow RIN, only 6. It's not really widely accepted. I know North Carolina allowed it during COVID, but I believe their orders have expired now. So keep that in mind. But RIN is a unique thing that you can actually use to your advantage if you know who to call. So RIN's limits sometimes include the type of notary act or the signer's location. For instance, in Montana, New Jersey, West Virginia, and Wyoming, you can only do RIN if it is an acknowledgement. But in Vermont, they can do any kind of notary act. But in Vermont, the signer has to be in Vermont with them. So it limits it to just the people in their state. Whereas Montana, New Jersey, West Virginia, and Wyoming, it doesn't limit the signer location, but it does limit the notary act. However, if you are an Alabama notary, you have the most unique feature that no other state offers. You can't do RON, you can do RIN. The signer can be anywhere in the world, and you can do all types of notary acts. You can do an acknowledgement or a jurat. And that's huge because no one else can do it. So if you've got it, you should be marketing this. Now, to do this, you need a platform because you need the ID proofing. You need the video. You need the technology to back it. But you could be doing remote notarizations, not electronic, but wet signatures. And marketing, I know a lot of mortgage companies that would love to do this. All right. The next thing that you have to know is that there are certain types of documents that are restricted. One of the most common ones is the last will and testaments. For instance, in Maryland, a notary cannot notarize a will on RON at all, completely forbidden. In Louisiana, they restrict trust documents. In Colorado, election documents. Louisiana is very, very strict. So they also don't allow you to do donation letters. So I know it's written in Latin, but basically you can't gift away your estate on RON. because they don't want you to do it on electronics aspects. They also don't allow you to negate or wipe away your spousal support on Ron. So if you are paying alimony to your ex-wife and she's going to forgive you for some undue balance or release you of that obligation, they're not allowed to notarize that on Ron. They have to do it in person. And in Alabama, the one restriction they have is they can't do remote ink notarization on absentee ballots. But here's the kicker. Even though these states limit these documents, other notaries in other states can do these documents. So in Ohio, for instance, I can notarize all of those. But a Maryland notary is limited. In Ohio, I can't do a deposition, but in Pennsylvania, they can. So it's really about knowing where you can go in order to get that solution for that client. So if you're a Colorado notary and your client says, I have this election document, I'm going to run for president and I need it notarized, you need to have a buddy that you can call on to get that one thing done, because you know darn well as soon as they start running in that election, there's going to be other things that you're going to benefit from. And by creating that solution for that client, you will always be their go-to person every time they need it. Another area that we have to be careful with Ron is apostilles. A good example of this is because Virginia, even though they've had the Ron laws the longest, cannot do an apostille over Ron. The Secretary of State will reject it. It has to be an ink signature. So the first question you need to know or ask is, will the Secretary of State allow for a Ron notarized document? The next one is, can the client validate through ID proofing processes on your platform? Keeping in mind, most foreign nationals cannot use the automated system. So you've got to be able to validate that person's ID in order to get them to sign the document. And then third, will the receiving country accept a remotely notarized document, an electronically signed document? So those are three areas of concern. So technically, can you do an apostille on Ron? Yes, but you have to make sure it's going to fall into all that you're going to have to make sure you check all three of those areas. Right now, there are 15 states that allow for apostilles to be done on Ron, and I'm in one, and I love it. It makes it very easy. Next, on some of the documents, there are qualifying conditions. For instance, in Florida, they have what's called the vulnerable adult status. So if the principal who's signing a will or power of attorney is doing so electronically, the notary has to ask very private questions, and it has to be recorded in the session. Are you married? Did you have assistance connecting with us today? Did someone help you with the document? What is your physical location? Who's in the room with you? Are you on any medication? Do you have a mental issue that would impair your judgment on signing the document today? Are you able to take care of your daily care needs? Can you imagine having to answer these questions? No other notary. It feels like such an invasion of privacy, but the idea behind it is they want to make sure that this person's really, really, really doing their estate the way they want to, and it's not fraud or they're not being coerced. And depending on their answers, puts them in different levels. So if they are free and clear, then they can be in the hospital room doing this, and the witnesses can be virtual anywhere else, and they don't have to be known to the principal. But then if they do fall into the vulnerable adult status, the witnesses have to be in the room with the principal physically, and they have to know the principal. So it can't be a nurse who just met them. It has to be like their friend or their brother from another mother, something, because they have to be able to attest that they are physically in their right mind And you can't do that unless you know the person. So it makes it really difficult. And Florida doesn't make this easy on people. They also require you to put an electronic will into the care of a qualified custodian. And the qualified custodian is an entity that is physically recorded in that state. So they have to be in a like physical location is in the state. They electronically store the will, and they electronically store the audit report, which is the timestamp of how it went, who signed when, where they, it comes with all the documents on all the platforms. They store the audio visual recording, and the notary has to make a declaration that they, in fact, notarized that will via electronic methods for this person at this time on this such and such date. And this qualified custodian has to retain this until after that testator has passed away.